One. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. I would like to bid to our invited interviewee, Miss Aina. So, Miss Aina, let's start with the interview. Well, shall we start with section one, which is your background information? The first question is, can you briefly introduce yourself and your teaching experience?
Hi, yeah, sure. My name is Aina, and I have been teaching for not that long. But as a teacher, I've gone through many months here and there to ensure my students receive the best quality of education and learning experience from me. I have also experienced teaching my students both virtually and physically.
All right. So, thank you, Miss Aina, sorry. The second question is, how diverse is your classroom in terms of students' learning abilities and styles?
In terms of my students' learning abilities and style, I would say that it's quite diverse. I have some students that are visual learners as they prefer looking at visual aids during my class. They find illustrations very helpful in terms of comprehending concepts or rules. I also listening to me talk during my class. These students have like auditory learning as their learning style. As for their I would say that it is varied. Some of my students grasp concepts quickly, while others usually require extra support. I also have a few students who are considered as slow learners.
Mhm.
I always make sure to give them adequate support, especially in reading and writing.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, let's start with the second section of the interview, learning theories in teaching. So, the first question is, do you apply any learning theory in your classroom, such as the constructive learning theory or behaviorist learning theory?
Yes, I actually do. One theory that I find myself applying the most is the behaviorist learning theory. So, this theory is mostly associated with B.F. Skinner, and it's primarily about how reinforcement helps in teaching students. It also involves imitation and consistency in practice. So, I try to be the best role model for them to follow after and create a predictable learning environment.
I understand. I've heard about B.F. Skinner a lot, and the other key pioneer of this theory is Ivan Pavlov, if I'm not mistaken. Well, let's start with the second question. Why do you prefer theory?
I generally prefer this theory because it focuses on repetition, which helps in memory retention and also reinforcement that ensures. So, as you see, positive reinforcement is important to maintain active participation of my students. It also helps in maintaining their motivation. It makes them stay motivated to learn, at least until my class ends. Repetition, on the other hand, allows my students to remember the information they learn more easily. Repeating something that you have taught does not have to be long. You can apply this by asking them a few questions related to the topic that they have learned in the previous class before you begin with the new topic. Besides that, imitation is just as important. It helps them to master skills faster as they try to imitate you or their peers.
Oh, I understand. So basically, you're applying behavior theory, and thus you have to be a role model, a good example for your students so that they can imitate your good behavior and develop their own. Is that it?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, let's continue with the third question. Do you mind sharing an example of how you apply this theory in your classroom?
Oh, well, of course. Well, I use the praising and reward system. Basically, every time my students successfully complete the task that are being given to them, I would praise them. Or sometimes I would reward them with star stickers for them to collect in their workbook.
Oh.
This can help motivate them to learn and also to make the classroom environment like more predictable for them.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, I use corrective feedback to help students adjust their mistakes and their learning process. They would also receive feedbacks from me so that they can clearly see the mistake that they have made.
Uh-huh. I understand what from based on my observation, I've seen that feedbacks are actually helpful. And it can also help the students to see what errors that they have made and try to fix all the errors, try to basically improve themselves. Well, thank you. And now we are done with which is student learning styles. The first question is, how do you identify the different learning styles in your classroom?
I identified the different learning styles in my classroom by observing their preferences and requests. For example, some of them would request for my visual aids, such as my PowerPoint slides, to be more colorful, and some would also listen to what I say attentively, and some would be more active when my classroom activities involve moving around.
Oh, so the last one must be your students with kinesthetic learning style because they prefer moving around and doing activities that involve physical movement. So, well, let's move on to the second question. What are the most common learning styles among your students?
For the common learning styles among my students, well, I'm not very familiar with the labels. However, some of my students always come up with excellent graphic organizers. They find it easier to learn a concept by incorporating said method. They also pay more attention to my visual teaching aids as they learn best through images and also basically from visual.
Hmm.
I also have some that enjoy hands on activities such as role playing. They prefer to move around and also learn a concept by experimenting on it themselves rather than solely just listening to long elaborations.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, most of them are not afraid of making mistakes. As for my students with auditory learning style, they always prefer to receive instructions verbally, even if I have written them on the board. They grasp information better by listening and discussing with their peers and myself.
Hmm.
Not only that, I have students that have brought background knowledge also. They always have an idea of like the topics that I teach and would relate them back to their own prior knowledge. Due to this, sometimes they would appear as more experienced than their peers.
Interesting. Well, let's move on to the third question. How do you accommodate different learning styles in your teaching methods?
I try to accommodate their needs by incorporating various teaching strategies. For example, I would provide informative visual aids, get them to brainstorm ideas, incorporate songs in my teaching, and even get them to dance during my lessons.
That's so fun. Well, now we are done with the third section. Let's move on to the fourth section, application to students with special educational needs, or SEN. So the first question for this section is, do you have students with special educational needs in your classroom? If so, how do you modify your teaching strategies to support them?
As I have mentioned before, I do have a few students that are considered as slow learners. As a teacher, I always try my best to accommodate their needs so that they can learn more effectively. I would check up on them, do follow ups throughout the lessons more often than my other students. I would also constantly encourage them to if they find any instructions that I've given.
Ah, I understand. That is a good method, especially in making sure that no man is left behind. Well, let's move on to the last section, which is the implications on teaching and learning. The first question for this section is, what challenges do you face in applying learning theories and adapting to different learning styles?
One of the main challenges that I face when applying learning theories is that I find that addressing the diverse learning styles in a single lesson, I find that rather difficult because some students they require more visual aids while others benefit from hands-on activities,
Hmm.
making it difficult to balance like different approaches. Time constraints may also limit my ability to personalize lessons for every
Mm.
learner. Additionally, some students they struggle to adapt certain teaching methods requiring extra support and also adjustments. Managing these differences while maintaining lesson flow and meeting curriculum objectives is an ongoing challenge for me as a teacher personally.
Mm-hmm. I understand your perspective. Well, this is the last question for this interview. How do you assess the effectiveness of your teaching methods in catering to different learning styles?
I assess the effectiveness of my teaching methods through analysis. I observe how students engage with different activities, noting which methods work the best for various learning styles. I also gather student feedback through discussions and also their reflections. Additionally, I analyze assessment results and use varied evaluation methods such as written tests, presentations, and also projects. This is to ensure all learning styles are catered to each student.
Mhm.
Based on these insights, I continuously refine my teaching strategies to better support my students.
I understand. Well, the information that you have given me is all very, very insightful, and I appreciate you spending your time to attend. And even though it is, well, this interview I would consider it as a short and brief interview, but I believe that I would be able to learn a thing or two from this interview. And thank you, Miss Aina, for including students with special educational needs, because I feel like that is something that most teachers do not consider as very important. So it is good that we've discussed about that too. Now I would like to conclude everything. So learning the the learning theories in teaching that you primarily apply in your classroom is the behaviorist learning theory, while the learning style that you've observed among your students are, while some of them are auditory learners, some of them are visual learners, and you also have some learners that are considered as, well, slow learners. And this is definitely fine as long as us as teachers will be able to adapt with their pace when it comes to learning and gaining new knowledge. That is all for the interview today. Thank you, Miss Aina, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for